morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another DxO webinar. I'm your host, PhotoJoseph, and today I'm going to be taking you on a tour of the retouching tool with focusing on portraits, just because there's not a whole lot to show in retouching. So we're going to build this whole thing around portraits. You can see kind of how I would treat a variety of different portraits and using the retouching tool along with it. So before we get into this whole thing, let's make sure that everybody can see and hear me fine. If you could give me a quick little shout out in the chat room, that would be lovely. Loud and clear, Don says. That is good enough for me. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Quick little bits of housekeeping before we get started. You should be able to see and hear me and see my screen right now as well. Whatever device or platform you're on, you should be able to see both, and you should be able to change the sizing of them. So if you want to see my screen bigger and me smaller, or get rid of me altogether, you can do that. So you do have that control on your end. Second, we will be you will be getting a copy of this recording in your inbox at the, it should be 24 hours after this ends. So if you miss any part of it or you want to rewatch any part of it, it'll be there. Plus it will be up on the DxO website and YouTube channel, usually within 4 days, I think is what they say. So there's and I'll bring the slide up again at the end, but if you go to DxO.com, click on Learn and Support, and then past webinars, you'll find things there, or the YouTube channel is just youtube.com/DxO Labs. I'll bring this up again at the end as well. And let's see, questions. We will be doing questions at the end, so go ahead and drop your questions into the chat anytime you like. After I get through the presentation, I will scroll to the beginning of the chat room there and look for what questions are waiting for me. Go ahead and drop any and all questions you want in there. I will do my best to get to them all, and I will try and leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for the questions. So with that said, I think it's time to get started. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the DxO webinar on portrait retouching using the new retouching tool and other tools inside of PhotoLab 3. As I inferred at the beginning of this, because this is retouching, but retouching is like there's only so much you can see and do in retouching, we're going to be spending this time really enhancing portraits and of course using the retouching tool as we go. And we're going to use a variety of other tools throughout the system as well. We are of course using the new PhotoLab 3, and if you haven't seen PhotoLab 3 yet, the big new features in here are the new HSL tool, which we will use a little bit today, the repair tool, which of course we'll be spending a fair amount of time in today, and the local adjustments tool, all of which we're actually going to touch on today, but again the focus is on repair. Now I'm going to start with this photo here, which you can see is a reasonably well composed photo, but not exactly the best lighting of the world of this lovely lady. She is totally in the shadow. Her face is in the shadow here. The flowers look pretty good. The background's, well, the background is the background, but I'm sure there's something we can do with this to make this better. So I'm going to start with smart lighting. Now, smart lighting is a really interesting tool. You see it's right here. It's on automatically. It's a really interesting tool where the software analyzes the photo and is essentially lifting shadows and reducing highlights based off of that photo. It's unique for every photo. It does an analysis and does the adjustment, but it does even more than that. And we'll take a look at where that goes in just a moment in here. But I want to point out that smart lighting is actually part of the base adjustment, the base calculation that happens when you first open a photo in PhotoLab. If I turn this off, we can see it's actually a really, really minor adjustment. You can see the picture changing a tiny bit. You see the histogram shifting. So it's not doing a whole lot to begin with. But if we look at a compare to the original photo, we can see that what we're looking at right now is essentially straight out of camera. This is how the base raw decoder has decoded this image. And then that is the adjustments that it has done so far, which in this case, it needs to do quite a bit more. But that's what we're going to get into. But that's just to point out that if we go back into the presets again, you'll see in here you have this thing called DxO Standard. This is what's being applied right now. DxO Standard is a whole series of adjustments which include smart lighting, and in this case, devignetting, a white balance adjustment, a color rendering adjustment, and it looks like that might have been, oh no, white balance, we already did that one. Noise reduction automatically applied. There's a variety of things that get applied automatically when you first load a picture into PhotoLab, and that's and the smart lighting is just part of that. So anyway, looking at this photo, we can see that these shadows on her face are a bit too strong still. So I really want to lighten that up a little bit. So I'll go over here to my DxO smart lighting, and you'll see in here I've got two different modes, uniform and spot weighted. We'll come back to spot weighted in a moment. And underneath uniform, you see there's a mode that goes slight, medium, strong, or custom, and underneath that is the intensity slider. all these modes really is a preset for the slider. So you see medium is now at 50. If I go to strong, it goes up to 75. And you may be noticing that not a whole lot is changing in here. In fact, if I really kind of drag this up and down a little bit, it's changing a little bit, but where we're really seeing the change is kind of in this darkest shadow under her hair in there, and it's really just not doing that much, right? This is not really cutting it. And you're thinking, well, hold on, I thought the smart lighting tool was smarter than that. Well, it is. But here's the thing, when you're doing a photo like this, where we've got this real, quite high contrast scene, and we have a picture of a person in there, right now the software doesn't necessarily know that that is a person. It's just balancing the whole scene out in general. And her face is quite a small portion of the overall image in here. So what I'll do is click on spot weighted. And when I click on spot weighted, you'll notice right here, it says one face detected. It has automatically scanned the image using face detection and looked for any faces that are there, and it has found one of them. And if I click on this little box, it'll actually show me the face that it found. Now at this point, I could add faces if it had missed a face, or if I wanted it to ignore certain faces, I could take the checkbox off of those. But in this case, one face, one person, that's what I want in there, so I'll leave that as it is. And now what happens when watch what happens when I drag the slider up. Look at how much more is happening to her face. We have told the software that this is a person and to focus on that person, to spot weight the adjustment on that spot that we have identified. And you know what, this tool, you could assign this to anything. You could drag this over anything. Like let's say that she was holding a bouquet of flowers and that was a really critical part of the photo. You could also put a box around that. It doesn't just have to be around faces. You draw the box around whatever critical parts of the photo are there. In this case, her face is the one thing that really, really matters. And so by assigning that, the entire calculation is based off of that brightness on her face. And so now it's working a whole lot better. So now we've got something that looks pretty good, right? If we do a compare again, massive difference between what we had and what we've got now. But at this point, the flowers have gotten a little bit brighter. In fact, I think the overall is probably a little bit too bright. Let's pull it down just a touch. The flowers have gotten a little bit too bright. If I go back to the very original, I like the richness of the flowers. Maybe it's a little bit too much, but that I like better than what we've got here. But her face is clearly better in the retouched one than the original. So now let's work on the flowers. Now, because we have this awesome HSL tool, the new hue, saturation, luminance tool, I'm going to go ahead and use this because this will allow me to isolate the yellow in the flowers, the green in the stems there, and adjust those independent of the rest of the scene. So let's start by going for the flowers. Now, if you haven't seen a demo on the HSL tool yet, if you missed last week's webinar, I'll give you a brief overview of it, but if you want the full deep dive into this, make sure you go back and watch last week's webinar where I did dive into this quite deeply. I'll start by turning it on, and just the very quick overview is that you have in here a series of color ranges that you can adjust. Each one of these can be individually manipulated, and these are basically just presets. Each one of these can be changed, so you can say, what I really want is to affect that range or that range there. And then the way these sliders work is this is a beginning and end of a color range, and then the outer dots are the feathering into the adjacent color range. So you have quite a lot of control in here. And then you also have a hue rotation, so you can rotate the hue of the entire image, or in this case, I could say, let's go to the yellow flowers and rotate the hue just of the flowers in there. So that's the basics of how this tool works. And then for each one of those ranges, you have saturation, luminance, and uniformity adjustments under that as well. Now, what I want to do is affect the yellow flowers. And I want to, before I start messing with the adjustments here, I want to make sure that I am actually selecting the yellow flowers. Because I think it could be quite easy to look at the scene and go, okay, it's yellow. I click on yellow and make adjustments. And then maybe you're not quite seeing the adjustments you expect. And that could be because you're not actually isolating that particular hue. So whenever I'm using this tool, what I like to do is start with where I think it's going to be. And then just to test it, just to find out, I'll do something like take either the luminance or the saturation all the way down to 0. And in this case, if I take the saturation down to 0, we see that we do in fact have those flowers captured here. But if you look at the edges here, let's zoom in a little bit closer, you'll see that we are definitely not getting the entire flower. So that tells us that this range up here could stand to be expanded a little bit. So I'll go ahead and drag the range out a little bit more, and you can see as I do that, look at that, we captured in that part of the flower in there. We can see there's a little bit of yellow poking through here, which tells me that we've still got some hue in there that we're not quite getting. It's very faint, so I don't want to make this so big that I capture all the green. That is not my goal here. So I will go ahead and bring it back to where it was. and then maybe bring the feathering out just a touch, and there we go. Now I have done a pretty good job of selecting the yellow flowers, but not selecting the green stems in there. So now that I know that I've got the yellow isolated, I obviously don't want to desaturate those. In fact, what I want to do is make them a bit darker. Too dark, it'll start to look a little bit fake in there. Bring up the saturation a little bit, and maybe at that point, let's zoom back in a little bit. Maybe we could stand to, well, actually that's pretty good in there. I was thinking maybe I should feather this out a little bit more. Actually, that does work a little bit better. Feather that a little bit more. Could get away with darkening these just a touch, bringing up the saturation just a touch on there. There we go. And now, if we do a before and after just for the HSL, you can see what I've done to the flowers. And I think I made it too dark. Let's bring it back up a little bit in there. Maybe I can get away with a little more saturation. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good in there. Now I can do the same thing for the green. Let's go for those green stems in here. Once again, I'm going to find out, I'm going to double check that I'm isolating just the stems. So I'll pull that luminance down. That's actually looks pretty good in there. So make that a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated. And I'm doing that independently from the yellow because I might want a different amount of darkening and saturation adjustment for the yellow in there. I can even try it for the sky. Let's try the sky. Let's go for this sky blue color in here. Are we getting the sky in there? And we're not. Look at that. So I grabbed the blue in here that I thought was the sky, pulled the luminance down. Let's try saturation. Nope, that's definitely not it. So now I need to rotate this hue until I find that slice of sky, and sure enough, there it is. I just had to move that a little bit. If I pull the illuminance down in there, we can see quite clearly that I've got that sky in there. Okay, great. So now what I want to do to that sky is, again, bring up the saturation. Luminance a little, how far do we want to go? Actually, we can go pretty far with that. That looks pretty good. Yeah, we're definitely getting somewhere. So let's do another before and after comparison on there. Pretty massive difference in there, pretty big difference what's going on. Okay, so now we've got our color adjustments, our exposure settings out of the way. Let's take a look at actual retouching. So zoom into her face, nice and close in here, and let's go into the retouching tool. To get into that, click on the little band-aid icon that opens that up. And now, to give you a quick tour of the retouching tool, let's explore how this works and what we can do in here. First of all, if you have not yet seen the retouching tool, let me give you a tour of the overall changes. You have a palette that pops up here. This is new. We have on here the difference between the ability to switch between a repair and a cloning mode. And cloning, I will possibly use cloning somewhere throughout this presentation. Cloning is just cloning. We've all seen cloning before. Take this, clone it over there. It's really nowhere near as interesting as the retouching, but sometimes you need it. And so at some point throughout the presentation today, I'm probably going to run into a spot where I need to clone, but for the most part, my objective is always to use the retouching tool. Excuse me. And the reason for that is I find that no matter what, if you start cloning samples of one area of the skin of the face to another, at some point you're going to start to recognize it. You're going to start to see a similarity in patterns, a repeating in patterns and textures. Whereas the repair tool does a really good job of analyzing the texture of one area and sampling that texture, but not cloning it, just kind of rebuilding it based off of the data that you're sourcing from, which is really a much better way to do retouching. For those of you who've been retouching since the early days, you know that cloning was all we had, and you used to have to go in there and very carefully clone a little bit from here, a little from there, a little from there. You don't have to do that anymore. So unless you are literally cloning something, for the most part, you really don't need it, but it is there. If you need that ability to clone, you do have it. Anyway, so we got repair. You have 3 different controls for your brush. You've got a size slider, the feathering slider, and the opacity slider. And we can adjust all of these, you can adjust the size and the feathering with the mouse and just using a modifier key. So if I hold down the command key and I scroll, you can see that the size is changing. You can see the brush itself changing size as well as the slider moving there. And if I hold down the shift key, you can see that we can change the feathering in there. So we can make it nice and soft or really hard edge on there. So you can make your changes without having to keep going back and forth to the slider. So what is it we're actually changing? Well, let's go ahead and drop in. I'm going to make this pretty small, and let's do a slightly less feathered tool on there. Say right about like so. And I'm going to start. I'm not going to do any actual retouching right now. I'm just going to start by showing you the tool. And effectively, what happens is, let's turn on mask so we see this nice and clear. I click on something, and there that I want to retouch or get rid of or heal or repair. And the software automatically identifies a source. It automatically chooses where it's going to heal from. If for whatever reason that doesn't work, you can now grab the source and change that. Once this is dropped into place, you can also go in and change the feathering of that. So if you decide you need that to be a harder or softer brush, you can do that after you've already added it in, and you can change the opacity of it. And the opacity becomes extremely useful when you're doing things like getting rid of wrinkles. Now, she obviously doesn't have any wrinkles to remove, but if you wanted to remove a wrinkle, if you were to leave the opacity at 100%, you will completely remove it, which doesn't usually look realistic. Usually what we want to do is just soften wrinkles. So by painting over a wrinkle and bringing the opacity down, what we end up doing is softening that and not eliminating it entirely. So those are the basics of what you need to know to use this tool. After that, it's just a case of getting the work done. Now, the way that I like to work, you see here that I've got my destination and my source visible in here. The way that I actually like to work is to hide the masks. I don't really want to see the masks while I'm working unless I need them. So let's get some work done. Let me delete that. And let's start removing some blemishes in here. She's got a little scar on her forehead in there, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Now you'll notice that I can click as I did to just drop a point down, or I can paint as well. So if I have an odd shaped area or blemish that I want to get rid of, I can change that. You'll see there it looks like it grabbed a source and then actually changed its mind. That's kind of funny. If I hide the masks in there, we don't see the masks, don't need to, and that blemish is gone. And that's it. Now I don't need to see the source at this point. All I need to know is that I clicked it and it's gone. Let's do another one. On her forehead, there's a little spot on there. Let's get rid of that. Click on that and boom, it's gone. There's another one up there. Click on there and it's gone. And we'll go over here, get rid of that, and it's gone. Perfect. Now there's one over here on her face. I'm going to actually go into 200% on here. Let's get a little bit closer and let's make this one a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit softer. And so I'm going to get rid of this blemish right there on her face. So I'll kind of get rid of that area there. And great, we got rid of that too. Perfect. Now, sometimes it grabs the wrong source. So I'm going to show the masks right now. And let's just say, for the sake of the demo, that it had chosen this as the source, the nose ring in there. And so what we end up with is a replication of the nose ring. Now, even though this is a repair, it's not the cloning, it is still effectively rebuilding that because it's such a dramatically different thing. Obviously, the software didn't choose that, but sometimes, sometimes it just does. And if it does that, then that's when you would go in and say, well, let's not choose from there. Let's choose from a different spot over here, and we're going to get a much better, cleaner result. So overall, it makes it really, really easy to go in here and just retouch your image. And it's always a good idea, by the way, to be doing this at 100%. Or closer, but at 100% at least. That way you can really see what's going on in there. And obviously if you want to get closer, you can as well. Quick little tip: if you are using this tool and you're using the zoom tool in here, you'll notice right now. So I just switched it to 200%, right? If I wanted to pan my image right now, I would press the space bar to pan it. The problem is that this field right here is actually still selected. So if I hit the space bar, it's going to change that zoom, and it's not what you expected it to do. So what you actually want to do, and then it does this because it tries to zoom out all the way. What you need to do is, once you've chosen the zoom from the dropdown, is hit the tab key. That sets this, and now you can hit the space bar to bring up the hand again. It's just one of those little oddities that I just wanted to share with you, because if you're trying to move quickly around here, you don't want to be grabbing the hand tool with the mouse and so on. This can just speed up your workflow. So just a little tip: if you do go in there and choose your zoom level from the dropdown, hit the tab key immediately after, and away you go. The last retouch I wanted to do in here is this tiny little hair in there that's just picked up the sunlight there, and it just makes it look like a spot on her forehead, which isn't good. So we're just going to get rid of those, and we're good to go. Zoom back out of that. Oh, that was the full screen button. Wrong button in there. Escape. There we go. Zoom back out of that, and we're doing pretty good. So I think that's everything I wanted to do with her. Oh, that's right. There was one more thing I was going to do, just to have a little bit of fun with the flowers in the foreground here. We clearly have these out of focus flowers in the foreground, but if you have, let's see here. Here we go. If you have DxO Viewpoint installed, this is an extra tool that you can add, but if you have it installed, one of the fun effects in here is a miniature tool. And so we can go in here and we could actually go in and let's see, where's the rotate? Find the right command in here. That's funny. Just forget where these things are. Rotate this. Okay, come on. Oh my goodness. I just did this and now I'm not rotating it. well, that's just silly. That is just, oh, there it is. Right, click on the dot, not the line. I knew that. I'm clicking on that. I'm going to move this down and kind of do a, let's do it like this. Add a big extra blur in the front there. There we go. Just to really defocus those flowers. If you want to like really amplify that kind of shallow depth of field look, just kind of a fun little thing that you can do if you have that tool installed. Just wanted to share that with you. Forgot how to rotate it, silly me. Okay, that, looking at my notes here, that is everything I wanted to do to that photo. So now let's move on to another one. Close that picture, and now we're gonna move on to this one. Now, this one is a bit different than the first one in that, first of all, the face is a huge portion of the photo, right? If we look back at her picture here, her face was a very small portion of the overall photo. Here, the face is a primary portion of it. So the software has already identified that this larger portion of the image is a more important part of it. And if I can do a compare to the original, we can see just how big of a difference this is. There's the original, this photo is taken in full sun, as you can see. There's not a cloud in the sky, so it's really, really direct light. The shadow from his hat is a really strong shadow on his face, and in this case, the original is too much. It's too much contrast. But the software automatically has already made it look like this. And if I go into the smart lighting, here we go, you can see that smart lighting is just set to slight, and it's made this big of a difference. If at this point I start dragging that up to bring it up bigger, we can see just how much light we can add into his face. Now we get to a point pretty quickly where it looks fake, or it has that kind of super shadow lifted, almost HDR look that doesn't look good on a face. So we've gone too far here, but I just wanted to show you just how far you can take that. I'm going to take it maybe just a little bit more than where it was by default, because it was looking pretty good to start with in there. And again, just to go back to the original in there, it's a pretty dramatic difference of what can be done. So now let's do a little bit of retouching on his face, because we got a few extra things we can do in here. We'll zoom into 1-to-1 on there. And he's definitely got a few extra things we can get rid of, some spots, some hairs, and a variety of them. So I'm just gonna start retouching and kind of walk you through the steps as I go. So grabbing the retouching tool again, I'm gonna leave it in repair. My opacity is up all the way. And let's make a little bit bigger one. I'm gonna get rid of this spot on his forehead here to start. So just kind of paint over that a little bit, and great, gone, looks good. Don't need to go into the masks and start moving that around. There's a stray eyebrow hair up here. So I'm gonna make this a smaller brush in here and make an effort to just kind of paint just along that brush in there, which by the way is easier to do if you have a tablet. I'm not using a tablet, I'm just using the mouse today, just using the mouse, but there, we got it, that looks pretty good. Let's see here, let's go for a couple of spots on his face here, a couple little hairs in there. Ooh, there's a big one under his eye. Let's get rid of this one. Now this is provides a interesting challenge. Just go into 100% on this. We can see here that it's right on this line of this wrinkle. I think I'm also gonna do, I'm gonna soften his wrinkles a little bit. I kind of like the cowboy wrinkles in there, but we're gonna soften them up a little bit. But let's start with this blemish under the eye. I'm gonna paint over this to begin with. Let's just see how it does. Let's see what it does. Which is a pretty good job. But notice here, it's done too good of a job of healing up that wrinkle under his eye. So I'm gonna undo that. And in this case, because I don't want to get rid of that wrinkle yet, I'll do that in a second pass. I'm gonna be a little bit more careful about the wrinkling, about the healing in here. Let's go into 100% on this, or 400% on this, get really close in here. And I'm just gonna go in quite a bit more carefully and paint over that. There we go. Actually, yeah, that looks pretty good. I just wanna see where it's cloning from, where it's healing from, I should say. Right next to it, it's actually pretty good. Maybe I'll move it up just a little bit just to make sure we're not getting any of that shadow from the wrinkle in there. And yeah, that looks pretty good in there. There's a little bit of almost like a cloning artifact in here that I'm gonna get rid of. See how, and I recognize this might be a little hard to see through the transmission through the web on this, but hopefully you can spot this. If you look closely here, you'll see a lightness in the skin that comes down, and then there's a gap before it gets light again. And what's happened here is we've done a repair from a little bit of that lightness that has rebuilt some of that lightness here, which I think is a little bit distracting. This isn't really what I want. If I show the masks again, you can see, if I select that, you can see where it's pulling it from. Again, I recognize this is hard to see, but right where I'm kind of moving the mouse in there, that's where that little brighter part is. And you can see that that's coming from this brighter part of the skin there. So I'm going to do another healing on top of the existing healing. Now, here's something that's really interesting and unique about PhotoLab. If you are using another tool for this, another app, and you wanted to heal in, what did I just do? I'll hand over there, come back here. I accidentally scrolled the scroll wheel on my mouse. It is trying to catch up. We'll give that a minute. If I had, sorry about that, there we go, zoom out and zoom back in again. If I was using another tool for this, I would find pretty quickly that to heal this area inside of the area that's already been healed, right? So now I want to heal something inside of an area that's already been healed. To do that, I would have to start painting outside of that healed area, that repaired area, and paint into it. I could not paint inside of the existing heal or the existing repair, but with PhotoLab you actually can. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint inside of here, painting a new heal inside of the existing one. Again, something you can't do with other tools. And now it's kind of grabbed the original spot, which I don't want. So I'm going to move that up to another spot up here. Let's hide the masks in there. And there we go. And now we've got a better result where we no longer have that bright spot showing up in there. Pretty effective. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out to 200% here. And let's work on this big wrinkle here, just to show you how we would soften up that wrinkle if we wanted to. I'll make this brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to paint over the entire thing. And at first, it's going to completely remove it, which is definitely not what I want to do. And actually, we see that it's kind of, well, let's see where it's healing it from, where it's repairing from. It has grabbed an area over here, so it's kind of replicating some of the wrinkles there. So first of all, that's definitely not good. Let's start by just pulling this down to a different part of his face. Let's do that. Now let's hide the masks and see how that worked out. Yeah, that's much better, right? It's better in the sense of we're not recreating a wrinkle, but I don't want to eliminate that wrinkle entirely. That just doesn't look realistic. So I select that again, take the opacity, and let's drop it down. Let's try like 30 to 40% or so. There we go. I guess that looks actually right around 50% even, looks pretty good in there. And now we can see that that line, that crease is still there, but I've softened it up. So effectively what I'm doing by doing this is I'm shaving a few years off, right? I'm making him look a little bit younger. My philosophy when I'm retouching portraits of my clients, of my portrait clients, is unless the client really wants me to, really ask for it, I'm not removing all wrinkles. I'm not trying to make a 40-year-old client look like they're 20 years old, right? That is not my objective. What I do want to do is give a person the idealized or optimized version of themselves. And so what that means is for anything, any blemish that is not permanent, so pimples, stray hairs, things like that, those get eliminated completely. But for things like wrinkles, laugh lines, creases in the face, I will soften those, but I won't eliminate them entirely just because it doesn't look natural. We're not trying to make like I said, a 40-year-old person look like they're 20. It just doesn't work out. Okay, so a little bit on there on my philosophy for that. So this is how I'd handle it. I would brush out that wrinkle, but then bring the opacity up so we're just removing part of it in there. All right, let's do another one. We'll get rid of this kind of bogey under his eye in there, paint that out, and the opacity is still set low, so I need to make sure that I've got that selected in there. Let's select that guy and take the opacity all the way back up because we don't want to leave that thing behind. It looks like I probably could move that sample source out there to a different position. There we go, and that looks great. Sometimes you'll notice when you turn off the mask, it takes a second for it to draw, and this is actually a pretty old computer, so it's not the fastest thing out there. So if you see that kind of double, like you see it change, that's why. It's just reprocessing it. Give it a second to reprocess it and redo that heel in there. That looks pretty good. My lighting is falling apart, excuse me. Losing, oh well, I'll just leave that. All right, so I think it's good enough for what we wanted to do to him. There's obviously more that we could do on his face, but you get the idea of what we do in there. All right, let's do another one. Let's go for this photo here. And on her, let's see here, what do I want to do with her? Yes, on her face, well, actually, before we get to her face, we are going to retouch a little bit of the hair here, but I'm going to do something else first. Let's close out the retouching. This photo, if we look at the original, we can see one of the things that's happening in here is a slight devignetting around the outer edges of the photo, which I actually like the vignetting. So I want to remove that devignetting. it's an important thing, I think, whenever you open up a photo for the first time in PhotoLab, to look at the original, see where it started from, because sometimes the correction may be correcting things that you don't want it to correct. Like in my case, I actually quite like vignetting. So I want to get rid of the vignetting that was applied in there. So I'll look for that, and I'm going to find it under the, is it geometry? No, not geometry. Detail. Oh, that's silly. No, oh, here it is. It's already open for me. Vignetting right there. We see it's got auto vignetting applied on there. I could just turn it off entirely, and you can see the edges getting darkened again. Or if I just wanted to dial it back a little bit, I could take it back. So it's not quite as strong of a devignetting, but it adds a little bit. So this vignetting tool is a corrective vignetting. We are removing the vignetting that was naturally applied by the lens. So again, I like a little bit of it there, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back in there. All right, let's work on the retouching. Let's zoom in close onto her face in here. Now, all of these strands of hair I like. That's cute. We got the strands of hair coming out from under the cap. I want to leave that in place. But here's one here, a couple hairs. You see these single long strands, and you see that it crosses her face, crosses her lip in here, and goes up onto the top of her lip. That I don't like. That's one that I want to get rid of. And the reason I'm going to focus on this particular strand is because this really shows effective techniques for doing your retouching without, well, effective way of using these tools. Let's put it at that. So let's go ahead and start by bringing this up and make this nice and small. It's going to be a real nice small tool. And I'm going to start by showing you the wrong way to do this. So let's do this wrong. I'm just going to start from the back here, and I'm going to get rid of this entire hair in one long swoop. And let's see if I can keep my hand steady all the way along, all the way along, all the way along, across the lip. I'm running out of room on my mouse pad here. I'm out of room on my mouse pad. I had to pick up the mouse. And up and up and up. Okay, now this is not going to be effective, right? Definitely not good. Because what's happened is we're taking, let's go ahead and show the masks. We are trying to rebuild this whole thing at once from an entire other portion of the face. And that's just, it's not gonna line up in there. So what you wanna do is do this in pieces. That's especially important when, let's just go and reset that, especially important when you're crossing a line in here, like crossing from her face to her lip. So I might be able to get away with doing the hair, let's say from here all the way to there. And I might be able to get away with the lip from here all the way up to here. But where I want to be careful is as it crosses from one dramatic change area to another. So in this case, her skin to her lip, from this part of her lip to that part of her lip, because we've got that dark line in between. Those areas I want to do separately from the other part of it so that I can choose different sources, so that the repairs can be built from different sources. So let's go ahead and I'll see if I can do this whole hair from here. Let's give that a try. Actually, before I even do that, let me undo that one. I'm going to get rid of this blemish right here on her face. Let's just clean that one up. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to get rid of a few spots in here. Let's just get rid of these because I know I'm going to want to get rid of them. So let's just do it now. Click, 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 get rid of those. And this isn't everything that could be done, but we're gonna get rid of the big ones in there. How's that look? Fabulous, okay. So now let's go in and do this strand. I'll make this nice and small. And I'm gonna start, not right at the edge, I'm gonna start a little before the edge, right about here. And let's draw this out. So now let's see if I give myself enough room on my mouse pad to get this whole strand. How steady of a hand do I have here? And I think that was pretty good. Oh, it has chosen a source that's really far away. Let's see, it has chosen, yeah, we can tell already that did not choose a good source. It's completely lost the texture in her face. Why is that? Let's zoom out and see. Where has it chosen a source from? It was completely off of the screen. So let's see here, what has it done? Oh, it's chosen it from her arm. Okay, well, that's obviously not good. So let's move this up above her face in here. And let's go back into to a close-up view. And well, see, I can't go into the hair in there. So maybe if I move it up above here, up above her face, that might work. Let's try that. Let's see if it works. Let's see if that works. Hide the mask. It's pretty good. We got some weird things happening over here, but actually that worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well. I'm going to leave it. All right, let's redo it because it really is too much. I did too much at once. So let's do this properly. Let's do this effectively. Let's go ahead and draw out just a piece of this line, not the whole thing in there. So let's see, we'll go into that face and let's start doing it in pieces. Do that piece right there. Okay, good. I'm actually gonna hide the masks and just start painting on it. Let's get rid of this strand, that's part of that strand there. And we'll do another stripe for it here. Okay, good. Get another one down here. Again, handling them all, handling these long lines as separate individual pieces gives me a lot more control. And the automated software that's automatically sourcing it is working better. Okay, now that one it didn't do. So let's grab that one there. Where is it pulling from? From way over here for some reason. So let's pull that up to there, and that should work better. Give that a moment. There we go. That's better. Okay, now let's get into the lip. So let's get to, there's still some cleanup we could do in here, but you get the idea. Now let's get across the lip. So this cross area, that's the critical spot. So I'm going to paint just across the line, and that's it. I'm going to stop there. And it's probably going to need to be moved. Yeah, definitely needs to be moved. So we'll show the masks. Get that source. You can see it. Is that the right one? Sometimes you get a little, yeah, that was the right one. Sometimes they get a little bit piled up on top of each other, but you just kind of zoom in close and dig through them. And that's the wrong one. Let's try that again. Come here, you. I'm going to go a little bit closer. They're too piled up on top of each other. I'm having a hard time grabbing the right tool in here. Tab, remember to hit that tab key to get out of that zoom window there. Okay, so we've got, is that the right one? No. Let's get this one. There we go. So you can see it's grabbed it from up here. I'm going to take that and move that down. And I'm going to position it across her lip, really quite right next to it. I'm going to go right next to it. We don't need to be far off of there. And let's see how that worked. That should, there, that's done a good job. And we've got this extra strand of hair here. Now, once again, I'm going to be able to paint inside of the existing tool to get rid of that. So let's just, inside of the existing heal or repair. Let's see how that works. Cool, that's good. All right, now let's go here. I'm going to make this a tiny bit bigger. Just that little portion of the lip there. Good, 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 good. Okay, see, this is going much better. Get in close, take your time with it, and let's see if we can do from here to here all at once. I may have to redo that, but let's just see what it gets. Well, let's see, maybe we can just move that. It's just off by a little bit. Move that up. Oh, I should be moving that down, shouldn't I? I'm moving the wrong direction. There we go. Move that into place. And you can kind of see through the, yeah, I'm kind of feeling like I should maybe do this in smaller pieces. Yeah, I'm going to do this one in smaller pieces. Hit the delete key to delete an existing one in there. And let that refresh. Let that refresh. Come on, software, refresh. I'm going to zoom out. I'm not quite sure the screen is not redrawing. Sometimes when I'm doing screen sharing, it does really weird things as far as the screen redraws. There it goes. I think it's maybe the graphics card just happened to be overworked because it's sharing the screen with you guys. But here we go. So let's try this again. I'll start with just this little bit of hair there. Let's get rid of that little one. And that should get rid of that, no problem. Go ahead and hide the masks again. There we go. And now I'm going to paint across this one little line on her lip right there. So we're doing it, the whole idea here is that we're doing this in pieces. There we go, let's get rid of that there. We're doing this in pieces instead of trying to do it all at once, and the results are generally going to be much better, much better. Now, this one needs to be moved again, so you see we got a little bit too much of the shadow, so I'll just move that up a little bit in there, and there it is. Cool, looks like I could get a little bit cleaner in there, but you get the idea of what we're doing. And then I would repeat that for the strand of hair here. Works out pretty good. So we've still got some more to do on that photo, but you get the idea. I don't need to do the whole thing in there for you to see. The whole point of this exercise is to show that when you've got a line like that, a long hair, don't try to do too much at once. If you try to do too much at once, it's almost never going to work out. Go in small pieces, especially small pieces when it crosses a line like that. Goes from the skin to the lip, maybe from the forehead to the cap, whatever it might be. Where you see those crossing areas, transition areas, make sure you do it in smaller pieces on there. All right, I'm going to do one more photo on here, and this one is actually not going to be much retouching at all, but this is one of my favorite portraits of all time that I've taken. I absolutely love this. For anyone who's a music fan, this is Little Freddie King in New Orleans, and actually, I think Little Freddie King Jr., I believe. Get that? We'll just do a quick little work on this because I do love this photo. I'm going to do a little bit of retouching to start. Really very, very minor, but I'm going to get rid of a little pimple on his forehead here. Let's get rid of this kind of a clogged pore, if you will. Look at how sharp this is. I love this. Get rid of this kind of strand of random eyebrow hair there. And, there's not much you want to get rid of. If you wanted to get rid of the blemishes over his eye, you could, but that's kind of permanent. Like I was saying before, that's who he is. So I'm not going to undo that. I'm just going to undo that. I don't want to get rid of that. What I really want to do this photo though has nothing to do with retouching, but just because I can, I'm going to take this into Silver Effects Pro 2. I'm going to make this black and white. Because when I shot this photo, little story, I shot this with the camera in black and white mode, which I got the raw and the JPEG, so I got the original black and white JPEG, and it's just such a beautiful image. I absolutely love it. So now we're going to do this in Silver Effects Pro 2, and I'm just going to very quickly go in here and grab one of my presets that I know is going to work really well for this. Let's see here. I think it was number 10. There we go. This low key preset. And I'm going to take my whites, going to crank those up, a little extra contrast in there. Take the blacks up just a little bit. Lift up the shadows of hair. Look at that. Look at that beautiful portrait. Look at that guy. What a face. Isn't that awesome? I just love it. I just love it. All right, I'm gonna hit OK. But again, one of my favorite pictures ever. Obviously, the final print that I've done of this has been retouched a bunch of other times as well. But this is just, had a bunch of other stuff done to it. But there's just a quick little retouch on that. OK, we have 20 minutes left. So I'm going to jump into the Q&A now. And if we have time at the end of the Q&A, I've got one more picture to play with. But let's just let's see what we've got in here. So again, if you have any questions at all, go ahead and drop them into the Q&A, drop them into the chat, and I will do my best to answer them for you. Kitty, hi from my photography class in Austin. That's awesome. You're watching my video during your photography class. Cool. Let's see here. Giuseppe, the clear reflection on the arm is too strong. That must have been, must have been talking about this photo here. Let's go back to that original one. The reflection on the arm, the highlight on the arm, is that what you're talking about? Probably what you're talking about. That was too strong. Yeah, you could definitely bring that back a little bit if you wanted to. Gary says, is the face too red? How would you fix it? Okay, you know what I'm going to do, Gary, is I'm going to show you, because that's something I wanted to do with this photo of the girl against the red background. Her skin tone turns out to be a bit too red. So I'll make sure that I save time to come back to that, and then you'll see exactly how to fix that. And yeah, you're right. Her face might be a little bit too red here as well, but I've already kind of got this dialed in the way I want to do it. So I'm going to show that to you. Bert says, can repair be used to smooth skin tones over entire face? No, you wouldn't use repair for that, but actually, so now I double have to do it. What I'm going to show you using the HSL tool is a really effective way of smoothing out skin tones. Giuseppe said, in the first photo, the clear reflection on the arm is too strong. So I'm sure that's what you're talking about on there. Yeah, sure, you can definitely dial the highlights back on that. Excuse me, Floyd Patterson is asking, I came in late, sorry, are these adjustments on a layer or direct? Neither. It's not a layer, it is a tool that can be turned on or off. So you don't have layers in the Photoshop sense of layers, but every tool is non-destructive and can be disabled or altered at any time. Larry, if you use HSL to take some of the red out of the face, say after someone has been exercising, how do you retain the color of the lips? Ooh, interesting. So I think you would probably get into selective adjustments using the brushing tools to get into that level of selective adjustments and not use HSL, because the HSL is going to be probably a bit too broad, but you may be able to combine what I'm going to show you in a couple minutes on that red photo to get rid of the red and then bring some of it back on the lips by brushing it in. That might be an effective way to do that. Obviously, every photo is different, but that would probably be my first inclination for how to approach it. Johanna says, retouching has always been a pain in the rear for me. What I love about this course is that it tells me how things work. Hey, right on how the software thinks. The rest you have to figure out yourself. Not getting into too much detail. Thank you and congrats. Oh, I thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, let's face it. You know, the software is not going to do everything for you, but it's important to understand what the software is doing so you know how to work within its parameters, work within its limitations, take advantage of its powers, and so on. And that goes for any app that you're using. Johanna says, by the way, with the New Orleans photo, when I'm working on pictures with smoke, the smoke often gets lost. Interesting. Is there any way to avoid that or even strengthen it? So clearly with this photo, we didn't have a problem with it getting lost, but I would say it's going to really depend on, well, as with anything, depending on the photo. Like in this case, the smoke is very bright. And so by amplifying the whites, I was able to make that brighter. If the smoke had been not as bright, let's say it was more of a gray, and I wanted to make it more white, then I would probably do a localized adjustment, either using control points or the brush or a gradient tool, just kind of depends on the photo, of course, and amplify the whites of that, because that's effectively what you're trying to do to make that smoke stand out, is to make the whites brighter. So take those gray smoke areas and make them brighter, and maybe even need to amplify the blacks, pull them down a little bit as well to make them darker and really stretch out the contrast. So effectively you're stretching out the contrast. You might need to adjust micro contrast as well. You could go in and adjust the midtones to make those brighter or darker. But if you treat them separately and think about them from a sense of it's just a black and white, black to white gradient, and you need to stretch that out, that's effectively the approach you would be going for. Oh, that was the last question. Okay, interesting that we get a lot fewer questions when I'm not answering them throughout. Okay, all right, let's pick this back up. So we're gonna jump into the red photo now and see what work I can do to this one. So this is my friend Genevieve, and this photo was shot with a specialized lens. This was shot with a soft focus lens. So it has this very, very soft look to begin with. Let's zoom in close on here. And you can see it's not out of focus, it's just soft. That's just the way that this lens works. But one of the things that I want to do on this photo is smooth out her skin, soften out the red splotchiness. So if we look closely in here, you can see there's quite a bit of variation in her skin tone. This is red, much more red than this portion here. Under the eyes is almost gone a little bit towards green. And you only really notice these things because you're looking for them. But when you're staring at a portrait, well, you start to notice these things. And this is completely natural and completely normal. Look at yourself, look at a photo of yourself, or look at yourself in the mirror, and skin tone varies. It varies quite a bit. But when you take a picture of it, especially under studio lighting, sometimes that gets enhanced, and you just want to kind of soften that and blend it together. So this isn't about softening the skin texture. This is about blending the skin colors together, softening the skin tone. So texture is a totally separate thing. This is about the colors. So what I'm going to do is use the HSL tool to isolate her skin tones, and then let's go and open up the tool here so you can see it, and then use the uniformity tool to soften those out, to kind of blend them together. Now, to get a full understanding of how this works, I really, really encourage you, if you haven't seen it yet, to watch last week's session. In last week's session, I did all about HSL. I showed how uniformity works using a color, a rainbow that I had drawn in another app, just to really show how the colors blend together. And it's a really effective way to understand exactly what's happening with the tool. So I encourage you to watch that if you haven't seen it. But in this case, I'm going to just do what I can with the HSL tool to smooth that out. So just like I did with the yellow flowers, I want to make sure that I'm only selecting her skin tones. So it's probably somewhere in the yellow or orange range. I'm going to start with orange in there, and I'll just take the saturation all the way down. And immediately we can see that I've selected part of her face, but not all of it. We can see that I'm still getting some of the red in her cheeks in here. Now this photo is going to be a challenge, and this is why I chose this photo, because of the red background and the red dress. So isolating the red on her face while not getting the red on her dress and the background is definitely going to be hard to do. But that's the challenge accepted, as I say. Let's see what we can do here. So I'm going to start by taking my hue range selection here and grabbing the actual outer edge of that and starting to drag it out. And as I move that out, you can see her face getting more and more grayscale, but very quickly, you see there, I just crossed the threshold. Watch the background. So at this point right now, her face is mostly selected, not entirely, mostly, and the background is left intact. I'm gonna move the mouse the tiniest little bit, boom, and look, the background. See how much the background suddenly got darker? And I'll move it a little bit more, and very quickly we're into the background space in there. So what I need to do is find that point where I haven't selected the background. Let's find the point where I have selected it and then back up just a little bit more. So I'm going, expanding more. There, got the background backing up a little bit, okay? So the face is mostly selected, but we can definitely see there's still some hues in there that are being missed. I'm gonna view this at 50%. I'm gonna give us a fair range difference in here. And now I'm gonna use the feathering. I'm gonna see if I can get the feathering. As I start to feather, I get more of the background, so let's back this off a little bit more. Let's try the feathering a little bit more. It's tough. It's definitely tough to find that, but I'm pretty confident that it's in there. You know what I'm going to do? Instead of expanding the feathering, let's try this. I'm going to remove the feathering entirely. Good job, genius. Let's try that again. I'm going to remove the feathering entirely. Now we have a hard line. You can see the hard line in the splotchiness there. And let's see if I can find a place here where her face is selected and the background is not. And actually, look at that. We can. All right, so what this tells us is that there is a pretty clear line between the background and her skin tone. Now, clearly we still have to feather it because we can see the hard edges that are happening everywhere in here. But now that we have grabbed all of her skin tone, so from there, at this point, I can start feathering it. Now, just to kind of amplify the point, I'm going to take this beginning point and I'm going to keep dragging it out until we get to that red. So there we can see we have very little wiggle room in here. Basically, we've got from there to play with. So I'm going to have to be quite careful with how much I feather. So I'm going to go back up till I start getting the skin lost. Okay, and I'm going to go the other direction, and there, I've got all the skin, none of the background. Now I'm going to take the feathering and very carefully feather out until I start to see the background getting selected, and there it is. Let's back off of that, and there. It's subtle. Now you can see here, if my intention was to do this desaturation, it wouldn't really work out that well. You can see that it's getting right chunky in the hair in here, but that's not my intention. My intention is to adjust the uniformity, and this is actually going to work out really well. So the uniformity slider, just to remind you of what happens for those who maybe forgot or haven't seen last week's, the idea behind uniformity is we are blending the hues together, almost blurring the hues together that are within that range. So all the hues that are within this range, which we now know are all the hues that are represented on her face, I'm going to blend them together by dragging the uniformity slider to the right. And now look at how much smoother the skin toning is. It's much more even. Now it has also gone a little bit too cool, maybe even a little bit towards green, but it is all similar. See, look at the difference in here, back and forth. In fact, I'll do it by this toggling this on and off. So back on, back off, back on, back off. Now when it's off, the more reddish tones are more pleasing, but when it's on, the smooth tones are more pleasing. So now I'm going to take the hue slider and rotate her skin tone just a little bit back towards red. Not too much, just a tiny bit. I actually went too far there. There we go, a tiny bit. And there we go. And now, there we go. Look at that difference. Now we've got, there's the original. Now her face almost looks green, doesn't it? And there's the enhanced version of it. I think that's beautiful. Do I need saturation? No, nope, don't need saturation. Luminance, maybe I want to brighten her face a little bit. Nah, not really. Especially since it's getting the hair in there. I'm gonna leave it like it is. I think that's awesome. A little compare in there to the very original to that. That's pretty dramatic. So that's how I would do that. Now, for the person that asked about the lips, at this point, let's say that her lips were painted red and getting selected in this too much. I would go in with local adjustments, and I might have to use a manual paintbrush. I might be able to get away with a auto mask paintbrush. Just kind of depends on the lips, the tones of the lips, but that's how I would go about doing that. And then I would undo whatever I had just done in here effectively. Yeah, that's how I would go about doing that. Okay, that is that, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a quick look back in the Q&A, see if there's anything else to hit in here. Maurice has a question. When I repaired Sky, sometimes I've been left with a pale circular patch the size of the brush. What am I doing wrong? That would be just needing to change the source. So you're healing something in the sky from an area of the sky that's too much brighter than where you're healing from. So enable the mask view, find out where it's coming from, and move that to a portion where the tones match more of the area that you're healing to, and that should take care of it. Okay. Alrighty, well, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for tuning in today. If you missed any portion of this, you will be able to find this all on the DxO YouTube channel at youtube.com/DxO Labs, or on the DxO website at DxO.com. Click on Learn and Support, and then click on Past Webinars, and you will find those. Those will be up about a week after this one ends. And of course, if you're already watching it there, then you've already got it. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye-bye.